Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, listeners, to the third episode of Vazology. Now, you may be looking at the length of the episode and are wondering, why so short? Believe it or not, I have been planning a proper podcast, so Vazology to me is not a podcast and is instead an audio series about my life. I remember back in grade 11 math, we had to fill out a survey about our future career possibilities and choose a small list of colleges and courses we wanted to attend. A college about a half an hour away offered a course on game design, but ultimately I applied for animation. More on that another time. I find that when you are asked about what you want to be when you grow up, 7 times out of 10, maybe 8 times out of 10, you never stick with one answer. I used to write 40-page stories back in 3rd grade and attended spelling bees. So for a while, I wanted to be an author. Then I wanted to be an architect. Then I wanted to be a graphic designer. Then an animator. I'm sure architect had an encore at some point. Honestly, with the amount of home renovation shows I watch, both myself and others are surprised I never went for architecture. The real reason was because I am bad at math. My 20s have been a weird sitcom. You have your major villains, and you have your over-the-top storylines that would only exist in a TV show. In a way, I had a lot of character development. I've grown a lot, and the past few years were adventures of self-discovery. Eventually, I decided that I wanted to make something that I could be proud of. In fact, that's my entire motivation for the game. I had a lot of doubt, and at times I still do, but I wanted to make a commitment. I began a Danganronpa fan game called Pinnacle of Deceit. I loved the Danganronpa franchise, although I like to pretend the second anime doesn't exist, but more on that another time. Even though the story, and I'm not talking about the fan game, even though the franchise had some issues with the story, I loved the concept. It's like Big Brother. I like the concept a lot, even if I'm not a big fan of the show nowadays, except for Big Brother Canada, which was consistently good. To a degree. So I started planning characters, I commissioned a couple of sprites, and I even had a Discord server. The fan game got a bit of traction, and I soon had a team of around 30 plus people. It was very exciting. However, that excitement didn't last long. It was clear that everybody was busy with other things. After 6 months of work, myself and maybe 2 others, if even, seemingly cared about progressing the fan game. I wanted to do something in those 6 months, but we had little to no progress. I kept setting up days for us to work on things, but I would find myself alone in the voice chat. I got more and more irritated. Eventually, I got another writer on board and we would discuss the plot and story elements. In the back of my mind, I was still really bothered over the lack of progress in what was now 8 months. So, as my heart was no longer in it, I cancelled it. I had no plans to wait 10 to 15 years for this project. It was a year later that I decided to potentially make a game. One of Steam's major seasonal sales was going on, and I noticed that RPG Maker MZ, or I guess MZ here since I'm Canadian, was on sale. I had VX Ace and MV, but I never used them, so I decided that if I really wanted MZ, or MZ, I really needed to do something with MV. I was heavily inspired by both Mafia anime and the game series Yakuza. Over the years, I had written characters and story ideas in my phone and computer documents, so I figured that it was time to write a new, story combining elements from those other ideas I had and make a game out of it. Also to note, I was inspired by Mafia anime and Yakuza to go the Mafia route. My reasoning for RPG Maker was because I didn't want my first project to be something massive like Unreal when I had little to no experience. I felt like it would have been too much for me and I would have given up. RPG Maker was something I was used to and played with, so it was familiar to me. My two favorite names are Sebastian and Vincent. So to me, I chose the one I felt fit the character more, Sebastian Kittorio. As a major fan of Ace Attorney, I felt the need to add some pun names to the characters. Kittorio was chosen because of kitten, Lena Febbins because of feline, Bea Arcroft because of bear, Bea R, bear. Tufty's name is Lombardi, but with Tuft as he is a lynx, so on and so forth. The story went through a lot of changes. I won't discuss the original story, especially since the game hasn't released yet. In the developer's room, I might actually record myself talking about it and release it there. But I will say the original story was something. I was inspired by Professor Layton's chapter setup for that entire story. Eventually things changed completely. I was inspired by JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind to have the main characters be in a squad. The idea of Sebastian being new to the Mafia was always there, and him trying to find out what happened to his father was always there, but now the story direction and plot points were different. Something I've struggled with and didn't know I struggled with growing up was ADHD. It was incredibly hard to focus on Fortune Familia when I couldn't focus on anything. All my life, I've started things, never finished them, moved on to the next. I found myself getting bored so easily I couldn't play games for more than 20 minutes. There is more to this, but anyway, making a game was difficult. Eventually, I was able to set up a psych appointment and was diagnosed officially, not a self-diagnosis, with ADHD. So I then had to take what was called an electrocardiogram, or ECG. If you're to be prescribed medication, they need to know that your heart can handle it. I had to take around maybe 4 of them, give or take, and then, I don't know, I think it was about 3 ECGs and then 2 appointments where I did cardio. So yeah, if you need to take an ECG and you may be nervous. I think I said nervous. They don't hurt and they only last a minute. You'll feel something, but not pain at all, and whatever you feel is extremely mild. Since being diagnosed and now taking ADHD medication, I've done a lot more work in year 2 than I did in year 1. When the game releases on March 20th, the game development will have reached just under 2 years. I believe I started this sometime in April. Originally, the story started out small, but then grew larger and larger. I have documents and documents of plot points and such. I've even thought of ideas for sequels and wanted to add things and that would have a greater importance in a second game. I love to write, what can I say? As for some of the characters and their species, a lot of the characters had their species chosen after the name. I was thinking to myself, how can I add cheetah to a name? How can I add lynx to a name? Feline alone was added to many a name, and the same with the Portuguese word for cat, gato. Once I had a bunch of names, I just started assigning them, seeing, what fit. It wasn't random. I just wanted to see, what fit and try to imagine the characters. So, you're, this name fits as someone of the Mafia, this one is a citizen, and so on and so on. At that point, I began to try and get a feel for each important character's personality, and that is when I decided on a friendship mechanic as a way for you to get to know them, including ones that are not important to the story. My parents were always meant to be a part of the game. In the game, they are going to be Alan and Katie Jones, obviously fake names. Back before my dad passed, we had spoken about this because I wanted to add them in the game and I wanted them to be a part of this. It was only after my dad passed, back in May, that I decided to make him a character you can develop a friendship with. There is a developer's room in the game. If you are listening to this, the key is given to you by somebody. The way how is completely optional. So with that, I'm going to end it here. This is the end of Vazology Episode 3. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, take care.